folks. There's this guy named Eric Adams. And uh I don't know, I guess he did some crimes? I don't know. But I guess we'll talk about it a little bit. Um so our story starts with Eric Adams, not that long ago, being indicted in the course of a federal corruption investigation. And he vowed, of course, to fight valiantly against such smears against his reputation. Now, you'll notice that this was initially published September 25th, 2024. And wouldn't you know it, ever since that date, Eric Adams has been courting the favor of one Donald J. Trump. Okay? And, well, wouldn't you know it, not that long ago, one Donald J. Trump, back in December of 2024, said he would consider pardoning Eric Adams. Now, this is interesting because a pardon has not happened, largely because it would be politically embarrassing to do so. It would be, pretty blatant corruption in a way that a lot of people would take note of. Even your most brain dead political pundits wouldn't really be able to wiggle out of that one. And, well, to that end, Donald Trump and his cronies devised a different way of doing a pardon, okay? Specifically, what they decided to do was, once they came into power in the new administration, they would meet with Eric Adams and they would basically tell him, hey, we are going to drop this case against you. And in exchange, you, as the mayor of New York City, are going to allow ICE officials to come in and do whatever they want in the city. We are going to do that. And, honestly, if we want anything else, you're going to help us do that too. And Eric Adams said, okay, yes, please, I don't want to go to prison. Because, well, you see, it wasn't just like your run-of-the-mill charges. Okay? The charges against Eric Adams are specifically, let's see here. Yes. Receiving illegal luxury benefits like free international flights from Turkish officials, and in return allowed the Turkish consulate to open in the city without a fire inspection, which is very strange. He also set up a straw donor scheme to inflate the numbers of his grassroots supporters and donors. He also defrauded the city of New York out of $10 million with said scheme. So he made himself look good while also stealing $10 million of the city's money. Okay? And in total, he's facing 5 counts of corruption that include wire fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and soliciting campaign contributions from foreign sources. Okay? So that's what he's been staring down the barrel of. And so he jumped at a chance to get out of those charges. And the Trump administration jumped at the chance to, offer him a way out in exchange for favors. Now, in case you guys are unaware of this legal concept, what was being offered by the Justice Department is typically what's called a quid pro quo. And for those of you who are not up on your legal language and ramifications, that is super illegal. It is, in fact, really illegal to offer a trade of that nature. And, well, that has led to what is being called the Thursday afternoon massacre. Okay? Now, this is, of course, a reference to the Saturday. Is it morning? Saturday night? Saturday night massacre. There we go. Which was famously done under Nixon, and it basically ended Nixon's political career. The idea being, you tell someone to do something blatantly illegal, they refuse and resign, and then you tell the next person in line to do something blatantly illegal, they refuse and resign, and you continue on down the chain until you reach, the janitor of whatever building, and they say, yeah, all right, and your plan continues. Okay? And, well, it turns out that, yeah, there's some wild shit going on as a result of this. Like, maybe this isn't getting reported on by, like, every single network, but it kind of should be, because this is basically, like, the political equivalent of, like, a small nuclear bomb going off in the field of, like, judicial ethics and, law. It's crazy. It's all the entire legal landscape of America can talk about right now. So let's dig into this a little bit. Let's take a look at this great piece that came out on the 14th by Ryan Cooper and David Dane for the American Prospect. Very specifically here. Okay. Adams has been begging Trump for a pardon ever since last November's election. Remarkably, as the New York Times reports, Bove negotiated personally with Adams' lawyers. And Bove here is, I believe, the Attorney General of the United States, I believe. Including Alex Spiro, who also works for Elon Musk, and Bill Burke, who's worked for the Trump organization to iron out the agreement. Oh, also, Bove is Donald Trump's personal lawyer who got appointed to the job. So, all the people involved in this are directly connected to Donald Trump. Yeah, he's the acting attorney general. Yeah. God. As Bove's order explained, the charges would be dismissed without prejudice, meaning they could be brought back later. So, part of what makes this all very disturbing is that they effectively blackmailed the New York City mayor, one of the most powerful political figures in the country. They blackmailed him to basically turn him into a puppet mayor. Oh, yeah, sorry, Pam Bondi is the attorney general. My bad. Even saying that felt crazy to me. But anyway, let's just take a look. So basically, as we worked our way through different prosecutors, different lawyers here, eventually what happened is described by Barb McQuaid here. Department of Justice leadership has put all public integrity section lawyers into a room with 1 hour to decide who will dismiss Adams' indictment, or else all will be fired, sending them strength to stand by their oath, which is to support the Constitution, not the president's political agenda. And well, we found our saps. We found our janitors who are willing to push it all through. But this story is still very complicated, and we're going to talk about it a lot more, okay? So let's first start by taking a look at Danielle Sassoon's letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi. This is annotated by the New York Times, which thankfully it was not annotated by Peter Baker. But figured we'll go through the letter here. And I know I read some of this the other day. We're going to do it again. Dear Attorney General Bondi, I'm just going to do this so I can see a little better, read it a little better. There we go. Dear Attorney General Bondi, on February 10th, 2025, I received a memorandum from Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, directing me to dismiss the indictment against Mayor Eric Adams without prejudice, subject to certain conditions, which would require leave of court. I do not repeat here the evidence against Adams that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed federal crimes. Mr. Bove rightly has never called into question that the case team conducted this investigation with integrity and that the charges against Adams are serious and supported by fact and law. Mr. Bove's memo, however, which directs me to dismiss an indictment returned by a duly constituted grand jury for reasons having nothing to do with the strength of the case, raises serious concerns that render the contemplated dismissal inconsistent with my ability and duty to prosecute federal crimes without fear or favor and to advance good faith arguments before the courts. Now, one thing to note here is that Danielle Sassoon clerked for Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Danielle Sassoon here is a deeply, deeply conservative woman. And what's really interesting here, right, is that I think that this kind of shows the schisms at play in the current attempt by fascists to take over the US government. They assume that anyone who is nominally conservative is going to go along with the fascist takeover of America, not quite realizing that not all conservatives are fascists. Yes, Antonin Scalia is maybe one of the most conservative members of the Supreme Court in living memory. And, well, Danielle Sassoon was an acolyte of his. She deeply believes in federalism as a concept. Or, sorry, in the Federalist Society. She's an originalist when it comes to the Constitution. And so we're seeing here that these things do not perfectly line up. And that the people who are being placed in positions of power haven't really reckoned with the fact that those positions of power within our government do not allow them to unilaterally impose fascism upon those below them. And that's interesting. I think that speaks to larger cracks in this fascist attempt to take over our democracy than we tend to think of. And that is good news for us, frankly. It's good news for us. But let's keep going. When I took my oath of office 3 weeks ago, I vowed to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I was about to enter. In carrying out that responsibility, I am guided by, among other things, the principles of federal prosecution set forth in the Justice Manual and your recent memoranda instructing attorneys for the Department of Justice to make only good faith arguments and not to use criminal enforcement authority of the United States to achieve political motives or political objectives or other improper aims. I am also guided by the values that have defined my over 10 years of public service. You and I have yet to meet, let alone discuss this case, but as you may know, I clerked for the Honorable J. Harvey Wilkinson III on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit and for Justice Antonin Scalia on the U.S. Supreme Court. Both men instilled in me a sense of duty to contribute to the public good and uphold the rule of law, and a commitment to reasoned and thorough analysis. I have always considered it my obligation to pursue justice impartially without favor to the wealthy or those who occupy important public office, or harsher treatment for the less powerful. I therefore deem it necessary to the faithful discharge of my duties to raise the concerns expressed in this letter with you and to request an opportunity to meet to discuss them further. I cannot fulfill my obligations effectively, lead my office in carrying out my department's priorities, or credibly present the government before the courts if I seek to dismiss the Adams case on this record. The government does not have a valid basis to seek dismissal. Mr. Bove's memorandum identifies two grounds for the contemplated dismissal. I cannot advance either argument in good faith. As you know, the government may, with leave of court, dismiss an indictment under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 48A. The principal object of the leave of court requirement is apparently to protect a defendant against prosecutorial harassment, e.g., charging, dismissing, and recharging when the government moves to dismiss an indictment over the defendant's objection. Rinaldi v. United States, 434 U.S. 22, 30, and 15, 1977. But the rule has also been held to permit the court to deny a government dismissal motion to which the defendant has consented if the motion is prompted by considerations clearly contrary to the public interest. The reasons advanced by Mr. Bove for dismissing the indictment are not ones I can in good faith defend as in the public interest and as consistent with the principles of impartiality and fairness that guide my decision making. First, Mr. Bove proposes dismissing the charges against Adams in return for his assistance in enforcing the federal immigration laws, analogizing to the prisoner exchange in which the United States freed notorious Russian arms dealer Victor Bout in return for an American prisoner in Russia. Such an exchange with Adams violates common sense beliefs in the equal administration of justice, the Justice Manual, and the rules of professional conduct. The commitment to the rule of law is nowhere more profoundly manifest than in criminal justice. Impartial enforcement of the law is the bedrock of federal prosecutions. As the Justice Manual has long recognized, the rule of law depends upon the even-handed administration of justice. The legal judgments of the Department of Justice must be impartial and insulated from political influence. But Adams has argued in substance, and Mr. Bove appears prepared to concede, that Adams should receive leniency for federal crimes solely because he occupies an important public position and can use that position to assist in the administration's policy priorities. Guys, let's pause here. This is kind of an incredible letter, right? She is accusing here one of the most powerful legal figures in the country right now of attempting to bribe the mayor of New York City into allowing ICE raids to take place throughout the city, into allowing, the most vulnerable members of society to be preyed upon. That's crazy. Federal prosecutors may not consider a potential defendant's political associations, activities, or beliefs. If a criminal prosecution cannot be used to punish political activity, it likewise cannot be used to induce or coerce such activity. Threatening criminal prosecution, even to gain an advantage in civil litigation, is considered misconduct for an attorney. In your words, the Department of Justice will not tolerate abuses of the criminal justice process, coercive behavior, or other forms of misconduct. Dismissal of the indictment for no other reason than to influence Adams' mayoral decision making would be all three. Basically, guys, what she's saying in this letter is like, maybe maybe she could find wiggle room if like this wasn't so blatant, but like it's blatantly illegal and at odds specifically with things that they have told her to do. It is the lawyer equivalent of calling someone full of shit. Yeah. The memo suggests that the issue is merely removing an obstacle to Adams' ability to assist with federal immigration enforcement, but that does not bear scrutiny. It does not grapple with the differential treatment Adams would receive compared to other elected officials, much less other criminal defendants. It is unclear why Adams would be better able to aid in immigration enforcement when the threat of future conviction is due to the possibility of the reinstatement of the indictment followed by conviction at trial, rather than merely the possibility of conviction at trial. At this point, the possibility of trial before or after the election cannot be relevant because Adams has selected the timing of his trial. Rather than be rewarded, Adams' advocacy should be called out for what it is: an improper offer of immigration enforcement assistance in exchange for a dismissal of his case. Although Mr. Bove disclaimed any intention of exchange leniency in this case for Adams' assistance in enforcing federal law, that is the nature of the bargain laid bare in Mr. Bove's memo. That is especially so given Mr. Bove's comparison to the Bout prisoner exchange, which was quite expressly a quid pro quo, but one carried out by the White House, and not the prosecutors in charge of Bout's case. The comparison to the Bout exchange is particularly alarming. That prisoner swap was an exchange of official acts between separate sovereigns, the United States and Russia, neither of which had any claim that the other should obey its laws. By contrast, Adams is an American citizen and a local elected official who is seeking a personal benefit, immunity from federal laws to which he is undoubtedly subject, in exchange for an act enforcing of federal law he has no right to refuse. Moreover, the Bout exchange was a widely criticized sacrifice of a valid American interest: the punishment of an infamous arms dealer, which Russia was able to extract only through a patently selective prosecution of a famous American athlete. It is difficult to imagine that the department wishes to emulate that episode by granting Adams leverage over it akin to Russia's influence in international affairs. It is breathtaking and dangerous precedent to reward Adams' opportunistic and shifting commitments on immigration and other policy matters with dismissal of a criminal indictment. Nor will a court likely find that such an improper exchange is consistent with the public interest. And Sassoon adds here in an annotation, I attended a meeting on January 31st, 2025 with Mr. Bove, Adams' counsel, and members of my office. Keep in mind, Adams' attorney is Elon Musk's attorney, just as a point to remember here. Adams' attorneys repeatedly urged what amounted to a quid pro quo, indicating that Adams would be in a position to assist with the department's enforcement priorities only if the indictment were dismissed. Mr. Bove admonished a member of my team who took notes during that meeting and directed the collection of those notes at the meeting's conclusion. They literally confiscated the meeting notes because they knew what they were doing was illegal as hell. That's exactly why they did this. Second, Mr. Bove states that dismissal is warranted because of the conduct of this office's former U.S. Attorney, Damian Williams, which, according to Mr. Bove's memo, constituted weaponization of government as defined by the relevant orders of the President and the Department. The generalized concerns expressed by Mr. Bove are not a basis to dismiss an indictment returned by a duly constituted grand jury, at least where, as here, the government has no doubt in its evidence or the integrity of its investigation. Basically, what she's saying here is that they had Eric Adams dead to rights on all of these charges, and there's no doubt that he did these crimes. Even Emil Bove says that there's no doubt that that Adams did these crimes. God. As Mr. Bove's memo acknowledges, and as he stated in our meeting of January 31st, 2025, the department has no concerns about the conduct or integrity of the line prosecutors who investigated and charged this case, and it does not question the merits of the case itself. Still, it bears emphasis that I have only known the line prosecutors on this case to act with integrity and in the pursuit of justice, and nothing I have learned since becoming U.S. Attorney has demonstrated otherwise. If anything, I have learned that Mr. Williams' role in the investigation and oversight of this case was even more minimal than I had assumed. The investigation began before Mr. Williams took office. He did not manage the day-to-day investigation, and the charges in this case were recommended or approved by 4 experienced career prosecutors, the chiefs of the SDNY Public Corruption Unit, and career prosecutors at the Public Integrity Section of the Justice Department. Mr. Williams' decision to ratify their recommendations does not taint the charging decision, and notably, Adams has not brought a vindictive or selective prosecution motion, nor would one be successful. Regarding the timing of the indictment, the decision to charge in September of 2024, 9 months before the June 2025 Democratic mayoral primary and more than a year before the November 2025 mayoral election, complied in every respect with long-standing department policy regarding election year sensitivities and the applicable Justice Manual provisions. The Justice Manual requires that when investigative steps and charges involving a public official could be seen as affecting an election, the prosecuting office must consult the Public Integrity Section, and if directed to do so, the Office of the Deputy Attorney General or Attorney General. As you are aware, this office followed this requirement. Further, the Justice Department's concurrence was unquestionably consistent with the established policies of the Public Integrity Section. The Department of Justice correctly concluded that bringing charges 9 months before a primary election was entirely appropriate. The timing of the charges in this case is also consistent with charging timelines of other cases involving elected officials, both in this district and elsewhere. I am not aware of any instance in which the department has concluded that an indictment brought this far in advance of an election is improper because it may be it may be pending during an electoral cycle, let alone that a validly returned and factually supported indictment should be dismissed on that basis. When setting the trial date, the district court and the parties agreed on the importance of the trial before the upcoming mayoral election, including before the Democratic primary in which Adams is a candidate, so that the voters would know how the case resolved before casting their votes. Adams has decided that he would prefer the trial to take place before rather than after the June 2025 primary, notwithstanding the burden trial preparation would place on his ability to govern the city or campaign for re-election. But that is his choice, and the district court has made clear that Adams is free to seek a continuance. The parties therefore cannot argue with candor that dismissing serious charges before an election, but holding open the possibility that those charges could be reinstated if Adams were reelected would now be other than clearly contrary to the manifest public interest. Mr. Bove's memo also refers to recent public actions by Mr. Williams. It is not my role to defend Mr. Williams' motives or conduct, given the appropriate chronology of this investigation and the strength of the case. Mr. Williams' conduct since leaving the government service cannot justify dismissal here. With respect to pretrial publicity, the district court has already determined that Mr. Williams' statements have not prejudiced the jury pool. The district court has also repeatedly explained that there is no evidence that any leaks to the media came from the prosecution team, that there is evidence media leaks came from the defense team, and no basis for any relief. Mr. Williams' recent op-ed, the court concluded, generally talks about bribery in New York State, and so is not a comment on the case. Mr. Williams' website does not even reference Adams except in the news articles linked there. And it is well settled that the U.S. attorneys in this and other districts regularly conduct post-arrest press conferences. In short, there is, in fact, nothing about this prosecution that meaningfully differs from other cases that generate substantial pretrial publicity. A court is likely to view the weaponization rationale as pretextual. Moreover, dismissing the case will amplify, rather than abate, concerns about weaponization of the department. Despite Mr. Bove's observation that the directive to dismiss the case has been reached without assessing the strength of the case against Adams, Adams has already seized on the memo to publicly assert that he is innocent and that the accusations against him were unsupported by the evidence and based only on fanfare and sensational claims. Confidence in the department would best be restored by means well short of a dismissal. As you know, our office is prepared to seek a superseding indictment from a new grand jury under my leadership. We have proposed a superseding indictment that would add an obstruction conspiracy count based on evidence that Adams destroyed and instructed others to destroy evidence, and provide false information to the FBI, and that would add further factual allegations regarding his participation in a fraudulent straw donor scheme. Okay? Just as an FYI, before this letter came out, no one knew that they were apparently looking into additional charges for Eric Adams for tampering and destroying evidence. So that's interesting. That is more than enough to address any perception of impropriety created by Mr. Williams' personal conduct. The Bove memo acknowledges as much, leaving open the possibility of refiling charges after the November 2025 New York City mayoral election, nor is conditioning the dismissal on the incoming U.S. Attorney's ability to reassess the charges consistent with either the weaponization rationale or the law concerning motions under Rule 48A. To the contrary, keeping Adams under the threat of prosecution while the government determines its next steps is a recognized reason for the denial of a Rule 48A motion. Adams' consent will not aid the department's arguments. Mr. Bove specifies that Adams must consent in writing to dismissal without prejudice. To be sure, in the typical case, the defendant's consent makes it significantly more likely for courts to grant motions to dismiss under Rule 48A. But Adams' consent, which was negotiated without my office's awareness or participation, would not guarantee a successful motion, given the basic flaws in the stated rationale for dismissal. Declining to rubber stamp dismissal because although defendant did not appear to object, the court is vested with the responsibility of protecting the interests of the public on whose behalf the criminal action is brought. Seeking leave of court to dismiss a properly returned indictment based on Mr. Bove's stated rationales is likely to backfire by inviting skepticism and scrutiny from the court that will ultimately hinder the Department of Justice's interests. In particular, the court is unlikely to acquiesce in using the criminal process to control the behavior of a political figure, which yeah, generally speaking, our court system doesn't say explicitly. You don't get a judge that's like, do what the government tells you, or else we'll slap you with the law. Like that. That's not. We're in Looney Tunes land here as far as legal concerns go. This is crazy. Okay. A brief review of relevant law demonstrates this point. Although the judiciary rarely will overrule the executive branch's exercise of these prosecutorial decisions, courts, including the Second Circuit, will nonetheless inquire as to whether dismissal would be clearly contrary to the public interest. At least one court in our district has rejected a dismissal under Rule 48A as contrary to the public interest, regardless of the defendant's consent. The assigned district judge, the Honorable Dale E. Ho, appears likely to conduct a searching inquiry in this case. Notably, Judge Ho stressed transparency during this case, specifically explaining his strict requirements for non-public filings at the initial conference, and a rigorous inquiry here would be consistent with precedents and practice in this and other districts. So basically, guys, Daniel Sassoon is making the gamble and making it explicit in this letter that this case is going to go back before Judge Ho. And Judge Ho, being the kind of man who has, the temperament for this, will launch an inquiry into these matters. And my understanding is, after looking into it, there are a couple of different ways he can go, right? Which is that he can either say to the U.S. federal courts, nope, you got to continue the prosecution. You can't drop it, which is not really the thing. Okay, that's very rare. Probably not going to happen. Or he can force the issue and say to the courts or to the U.S. Attorney's Office, hey, you have to, if you're going to drop the charges, you have to drop them without prejudice. You have to drop them in a way where you can't just bring them back. Because obviously you're seeking favors here in a way that isn't acceptable. So, yeah, basically, those are the two avenues, and it's probably going to be the second one, which is deeply unsatisfying. But, sorry, I always get with or without prejudice confused in my head. Is it with prejudice? Either way. You know what I mean. That drop the charges in a way where they can't be brought back. There we go. Hey, Sweet Myths, how you doing? Thanks for letting us use your music in the show. Okay, with prejudice means can't be tried again. Okay. So basically, the more likely outcome here is Judge Ho saying, like, you have to, like, drop them with prejudice, meaning you can't bring them back. Cool. Oh, that is true. Judge Ho can also, like, basically create a media spectacle and order that these attorneys for the U.S. government come in to make the arguments in court on the record under oath. And that, I hope he does that, because that would be incredible. That would be one of the, like, most important legal hearings of all time in our country's history. Why not the first option? It's just very rare. And usually in law, if something's very rare, it means that it's hard to do and hard to enforce. Good night, Kiwi TP. Okay. Nor is there any realistic possibility that Adams' consent will prevent a lengthy judicial inquiry that is detrimental to the department's reputation, regardless of outcome. In that regard, although the Flynn case may come to mind as a comparator, it is distinct in one important way. In that case, the government moved to dismiss an indictment with the defendant's consent and faced resistance from a skeptical district judge. But in Flynn, the government sought dismissal with prejudice because it had become convinced that there was insufficient evidence that General Flynn had committed any crime. That ultimately made the government's rationale defensible because insufficient evidence is a quintessential justification for dismissing charges. Here, no one in the department has expressed any doubts as to Adams' guilt. And even in Flynn, the president ultimately chose to cut off the extended and embarrassing litigation over dismissal by granting a pardon. C. I cannot, in good faith, request the contemplated dismissal. Because the law does not support a dismissal, and because I am confident that Adams has committed the crimes with which he is charged, I cannot agree to seek a dismissal driven by improper considerations. As Justice Robert Jackson explained, the prosecutor is, at his best, is one of the most beneficent forces in our society. When he acts from malice or other base motives, he is one of the worst. I understand my duty as a prosecutor to mean enforcing the law impartially, and that includes prosecuting a validly returned indictment, regardless whether its dismissal would be politically advantageous to the defendant or to those who appointed me. A federal prosecutor is the representative of an ordinary party to a controversy, or sorry, is not, wait, a federal prosecutor is the representative not of an ordinary party to a controversy, but of a sovereignty whose obligation to govern impartially is as compelling as its obligation to govern at all. For the reasons explained above, I do not believe there are reasonable arguments in support of Rule 48A motion to dismiss a case that is well supported by the evidence and the law. I understand that Mr. Bove disagrees, and I'm mindful of your recent order reiterating prosecutors' duty to make good faith arguments in support of the executive branch's positions. But because I do not see any good faith basis for the proposed position, I cannot make such arguments consistent with my duty of candor. In particular, the rationale given by Mr. Bove, an exchange between a criminal defendant and the Department of Justice akin to the bout exchange with Russia, is, as explained above, a bargain that a prosecutor should not make. Moreover, dismissing without prejudice and with the express option of again indicting Adams in the future creates obvious ethical problems by implicitly threatening future prosecution if Adams' cooperation with enforcing the immigration laws proves unsatisfactory to the department. Finally, given the highly generalized accusations of weaponization weighed against the strength of the evidence against Adams, a court will likely question whether the basis is pretextual. I remain baffled by the rushed and superficial process by which this decision was reached in seeming collaboration with Adams' counsel and without my direct input on the ultimate stated rationale for dismissal. Mr. Bove admonished me to be mindful of my obligation to zealously defend the interests of the United States and to advance good faith arguments on behalf of the administration. I hope you share my view that soliciting and considering the concerns of the U.S. Attorney overseeing the case serves rather than hinders that goal, and that we can find some time to meet. In the event you are unwilling to meet or to reconsider the directive in light of the problems raised by Mr. Bove's memo, I am prepared to offer my resignation. It has been and continues to be my honor to serve as a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. Daniel R. Sassoon. So that's the letter. That is the letter. And in a rage, Emil Bove wrote an 8-page response letter trying to shit all over Danielle Sassoon. It's we're not gonna read it because basically every aspect of this, it's incredibly obvious that the prosecutors or the U.S. Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General herself are acting in pretty shady legality, we'll say. But I do want to read you one more letter, and it is the resignation letter of Hagen Scotton, the assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. This is, I believe, the last attorney to resign as a result of this. Okay? I'm just going to read you out this email. Mr. Bove, I have received correspondence indicating that I refused your order to move to dismiss the indictment against Eric Adams without prejudice, subject to certain conditions, including the express possibility of reinstatement of the indictment. That is not exactly correct. The U.S. Attorney, Daniel R. Sassoon, never asked me to file such a motion, and I therefore never had an opportunity to refuse. But I am entirely in agreement with her decision not to do so, for the reasons stated in her February 12, 2025 letter to the Attorney General. In short, the first justification for the motion, that Damian Williams' role in the case somehow tainted a valid indictment supported by ample evidence and pursued under 4 different U.S. attorneys, is so weak as to be transparently pretextual. The second justification is worse. No system of ordered liberty can allow the government to use the carrot of dismissing charges or the stick of threatening to bring them again to induce an elected official to support its policy objectives. There is a tradition in public service of resigning in a last-ditch effort to head off a serious mistake. Some will view the mistake you are committing here in light of their generally negative views of the new administration. I do not share those views. I can even understand how a chief executive whose background is in business and politics might see the contemplated dismissal with leverage as a good, if distasteful, deal. But any assistant U.S. attorney would know that our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials, in this way. If no lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me. Please consider this my resignation. It has been my honor to serve as a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. Hagen Scotton. Ten out of 10 letter right there. Hagen Scotton, 10 out of 10. Well done. 0 notes. I'm confused how resigning effectively fights this. It's basically in the tradition of the United States government, resigning repeatedly brings a lot more attention to an issue, and also leaves people scrambling to fill that position, especially when it's something so explicitly illegal that you go down the line. When you've suddenly gone 7 lawyers deep to get someone to be your sap, that looks pretty bad. It gets a lot of media attention. Okay? Yep, they pulled everyone into a room and said, do this or you're fired. But gotta say, well, people are kind of putting some dots together here. Here's Eric Adams on Fox News with Tom Homan, the guy who runs ICE now.
Doesn't come through.
Macy's, you're up early anyway.
If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City,
Right.
and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, "Where the hell is the agreement we came to?" So, doesn't come.
Yeah, if he doesn't adhere to that agreement, I'm gonna arrest him. These people are not smart, guys. The corruption is just so blatant, you know? It's so blatant that, like, bringing the attention onto this is causing some really big waves. Because guess what, guys? Yeah, Eric Adams is capitulating immediately. Right after that interview, Adams opens Rikers to ICE agents. But you know what? Something you guys need to know about New York City. New York City hates Donald Trump, and they hate the Donald Trump administration, and they hate the puppets of a Trump administration. And things are rapidly getting bad for Eric Adams. Okay? I wanted to read you guys a small excerpt here. This is from, what day did this come out? This is from February 13th. This is from one day, well, basically the same day as, I believe, Daniel Sassoon's letter. I think that might have been the 12th or the 13th. I'm getting the days mixed up. But the mayor of New York, Kathy Hochul, went on Rachel Maddow's show. Okay? And Rachel Maddow asked some questions of Governor Hochul. Let me ask you about this drama involving Mayor Eric Adams and the corruption charges against him. What we've seen with the resignation of the U.S. attorney, the Trump-appointed acting U.S. attorney, the removal of line prosecutors on the case, the demand from Maine Justice to drop that case, the refusal from SDNY to do it, then the resignation of Maine Justice officials who had the case dumped on them and they wouldn't take it either. This is an incredible drama in terms of federal law enforcement right now, but you are in a very unusual position, a singular position with regards to this case, which is that thanks to the New York State Constitution and New York City law, you are the only person who has the power to effectively fire Mayor Eric Adams and remove him from his position, which might conceivably moot this whole fight. How are you thinking about that now? You could have done it at any point until now, but now, given this crisis that's emerged in federal law enforcement around this case, are you feeling differently about that responsibility? And here is the response from Kathy Hochul. What? Okay. Let me tell you from a couple of angles here. One is that this is unbelievably unprecedented for the Department of Justice in Washington to interfere in this way. My husband was a 30-year federal prosecutor. Barack Obama made him his U.S. attorney. You look at what happened here. This is not supposed to happen in our system of justice. The Bondi administration in that Department of Justice is already showing they're corrupt. Now, set that aside. I did see the letter that was issued by the acting United States attorney. The allegations are extremely concerning and serious, but I cannot, as governor of this state, have a knee-jerk, politically motivated reaction like a lot of other people are saying right now. I have to do what's smart, what's right, and I'm consulting with other leaders in government at this time. You got to have one sane person in this state who can cut through all the crap and say, what is my responsibility? Guide me to. And the allegations came out last September and the city was in chaos. I said, I will intercede and work with the mayor to get rid of a lot of people who are under indictment, calm it down, bring in a new police chief commissioner who's doing an outstanding job. Our subways are safer. People are feeling better around the city. More people are coming back. I don't want our rebirth to be stopped by this. I have to maintain stability and the chaos and do what's right for the city of New York, because as governor, I also represent the city. These are my constituents as well. I'm going to make sure they're protected here. So this just happened. I need some time to process this and figure out the right approach. But you are consulting with other leaders, consulting with your advisors, and looking anew at this matter? Of course I am. Of course I am. Now, that's interesting because that is leaving the door open to the possibility of removing Mayor Eric Adams. And that's an interesting possibility. I think that would be really good. I think that she is spineless enough that she could actually cave to mounting political pressure. And oh, did Kathy Hochul put out a statement today? Let's take a look. What you got for us, Kathy? Axios. Hochul weighs serious step of removing New York City mayor after deputies resign. Yeah, okay. Well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. Okay, I'm not done with the story yet. Okay. So basically, Politico kind of lays this out here. Okay, which is that Kathy Hochul really wants to do well and excel in politics beyond being a governor, right? And she's kind of she wants to get reelected, and that reelection is happening sooner rather than later. And she does not want to go out on a political limb like this and possibly rankle feathers, which, you know, because she's spineless. But basically, to summarize this article, because she is spineless, that works in our favor in this case. Because guess what? People fucking hate Eric Adams now. They hate him. They view him as an extension of Donald Trump, and New Yorkers fucking hate Donald Trump. And I'm just throwing this out there. The lieutenant governor called for Mayor Adams to be replaced. City council speaker of New York City has called on Adams to step down. And, well, this happened earlier today.
And vows to keep his job.
4 deputy mayors resigned all at once today. They oversee much of the city government, including public safety, health services, and operations.
That's half. That's a full half of the deputy mayors of New York City resigned. That's a lot.
Political reporter Marcia Kramer is here now to break down all of these developments. It was like whiplash today, Marcia.
It really was, Christine and Dick. Mayor Adams surrounded himself with an interfaith group of clergy in Brooklyn, while 4 of his top deputy mayors were handing him his walking papers. He seemed undeterred by the development.
Yeah, of course he's undeterred. Of course, he has no option, because if he backs down, if he resigns willingly, then he's just going to get re-prosecuted.
There was a laying on of hands as clergy prayed for Adams at a church in Brooklyn, as the mayor was facing a dramatic crisis in confidence in his leadership. 4 deputy mayors gave notice that it was no longer tenable to continue to work for him as the controversy continued to grow over the possibility he agreed to a quid pro quo to get his criminal case dropped.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Adams was a dipshit long before this, but like he's actively been in talks to run as a Republican in the upcoming mayoral race. Like, dude is just the worst.
Deputy Mayors Maria Torres Springer, Ann Williams Isom, Mira Joshi, and Chauncey Parker will stay on until replacements can be found and there is an orderly transition. Torres Springer, Williams Isom, and Joshi issued a statement saying, quote, "Due to the extraordinary events of the last few weeks and to stay faithful to the oaths we swore to New Yorkers and our families, we have come to the difficult decision to step down from our roles." Asked about it, the mayor pointed to the fact that he'd weathered other departures departures, including former First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, Deputy Mayor Phil Banks, Police Commissioner Edward Caban, and Schools Chancellor David Banks.
You know, maybe listing off all of the people who couldn't stand working with you is not the greatest strategy right now to consolidate and strengthen your political base. Just throwing that out there.
Come on, you know, let's go back. When I was indicted, y'all remember what happened? People departed. When I was indicted, people said that's the end of the administration.
Remember when he said one of the greatest things to happen in New York City was 9/11? Anyone remember that? Is just me? All right.
People said that, you know, people have lost confidence, and go back and do an analysis from the day that I was indicted to what we have accomplished. That is my ability to lead through turmoil, and I'm going to continue to do that.
In a statement, Adams said he was disappointed, adding, quote, "Let me be crystal clear. New York City will keep moving forward just as it does every day." During the campaign rally, Adams described himself as a man who didn't break despite his many travails.
He didn't break when he was a young boy in the police department being beat.
That's right.
He didn't break when someone shot out his car windows. He didn't break when they wanted to fire him after 22 years for standing up and fighting for you. He didn't break when they indicted him. He didn't break. He didn't break. He didn't break. Because the reason I'm not going to break, because I need to fight for you.
Dude, all of these people look absolutely over his shit. Are you like these are dude. Look at them. This guy's literally rolling his eyes back there.
Meanwhile, City Controller Brad Lander wrote a letter to Adams demanding he come up with a contingency plan for managing the city because he said the departures of the deputy mayors would create, and I quote, "an unprecedented leadership vacuum." Lander, you recall, is running in the Democratic primary to replace Adams.
It is a Tuesday night massacre.
It is a Tuesday night massacre. Just so people know what I'm talking about.
When you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open. This is a very, very complicated city, and that's why it's the greatest city on the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ, dog. Jesus Christ. It's the greatest city in the world. One day you could wake up with planes flying into buildings. The next day, you know, get some good falafel. You know what I'm saying? Jesus Christ. How this man successfully puts his pants on every morning is genuinely a mystery to me. But yeah, the pressure obviously is hitting a critical mass here because well, in the wake of those resignations, Kathy Hochul weighing serious step of removing New York City mayor after deputies resign. This, to me, being reported in the media, basically guarantees that they want to do it. Right? Like, she's leaning towards it, otherwise she wouldn't have said anything. Okay? Yeah, she's meeting with key leaders at her Manhattan office Tuesday to discuss a path forward after 4 top officials in New York City, Mayor Adams' administration resigned. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, it destabilizes city government, too. All of them leaving at once. Hochul noted that in the 235 years of New York State history, the governor's power to remove an elected has never been used, and that overturning the will of the voters is a serious step that should not be taken lightly. However, she said the alleged conduct at City Hall that has been reported over the past 2 weeks is troubling and cannot be ignored. Adams' press secretary, Kayla Mamalak Atlas, what a cool name, said Monday night that the mayor has been clear that his loyalty is solely with the 8.3 million New Yorkers. He was always available to speak with the governor about how he can continue to deliver for them. God. Yeah, all right. Meeting tomorrow. I guess we'll find out whether Mayor Adams gets to remain mayor and outside of prison. In the next 24 hours. That's cool. That's cool. But yeah, whole lot going on over there. Very messy. But I think a lot of the aspects of this story reveal that, like, our enemies are incredibly stupid and incredibly incompetent and also incredibly fractured, and they overestimate themselves. They overstep themselves. They viewed this as an opportunity to get leverage over the mayor of a population of 8.3 million people. They viewed this as an opportunity to try and subvert democracy here in the United States. And you know what? They overplayed their hand and they made a bet on the wrong conservative. Because guess what? Not every conservative is on board with the fascist plan to coup America. Not every conservative has been bought by Elon Musk. And I think that is, a sign, a hopeful sign. Like, I know that this is all bad. This is just political turmoil on a scale we haven't seen. Like, in a normal world, this would be cause for, like, impeaching the president and removing him from power. Like, that's the scale of what this type of corruption in normal times would lead to. In Donald Trump world, it barely gets connected to Donald Trump at all, But the fact that this is not succeeding, the fact that, people who are bad, are overplaying their hand is good, actually.